eliminate as much fear as possible from people being able to do their job excellently so that when the tough occurs, they're not afraid. That's key.
Counting down in 3, 2, 1, blast off. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI and the Future of Work. Thanks as always for making this one of the most downloaded podcasts about the future of work. If you enjoy what we do, please like, comment, and share in your favorite podcast app, and we'll keep sharing amazing conversations like the one we have for today. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. I'm also an investor in and advisor to more than 30 AI-first companies, and as you know, a firm believer in the power of technology to make humans better. If you're passionate about changing the world with AI, or maybe just ready for your next adventure, let's talk. Now, we learn from AI thought leaders weekly on this show, and of course, the added bonus is you get one AI fun fact each week. Today's fun fact: Sachin Rawat writes this week in Big Think that generative AI can be used to analyze patterns in DNA sequences. Just like LLMs or large language models can predict the next word in a sentence, they can also learn to speak the language of your DNA. Expect LLMs to soon solve problems that have eluded biologists and geneticists for decades, like where proteins are likely to fold, or RNA, and how genes are located on distant parts of the genome interact to predict risk of disease. DNA-specific LLMs like AlphaFold from Google DeepMind are already generating 3D models of proteins, including some that have never been discovered. Engineering biology with LLMs is a fascinating new field of research. As frequent listeners know, we've talked about that in recent episodes. It also introduces many new ethical concerns, and we will, of course, continue discussing those on this podcast. As always, we'll link to the full article in today's show notes. But now shifting to this week's special conversation, in no small part because we're taping this live in downtown Mountain View on Castro Street, which is always a pleasure. AI and the Future of Work, history buffs, I believe this is episode 6 of more than 200, where we've taped it live. We've had great recent discussions about AI and the law with guests like Robert Plotkin. That was a fun episode. And we've had many interesting conversations about AI with CIO legends like the great Mark Settle from Okta and recently Carter Bussey from Mercado. In over 200 episodes, we unbelievably haven't yet discussed how to deliver IT service to the legal industry. We're going to change that today. We're joined by a serial tech leader for law firms who is also a member of the board of directors of the International Legal Technology Association, or ILTA. Jim McKenna has been delivering technology to attorneys and coaching others who do the same for more than 2 decades. In his current role at perennial Silicon Valley top law firm Fenwick West, Jim supports an organization of more than 1,000 employees as CIO. He oversees teams that manage IT and security and is first and foremost a thought leader for the business. Prior to Fenwick, Jim held similar roles at Morrison and Forester. And for full disclosure, PeopleRain is a Fenwick client, and I've used Fenwick as counsel for many companies over the past couple decades. And without further ado, Jim, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. Let's get started by having you share maybe a bit more about your background and how you got into this space.
Thank you very much, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here. I feel that I have always had an interest in solving problems. I've always had an intellectual curiosity about anything that's in front of me that has perplexed me. I've had the opportunity to work with a variety of excellent mentors who showed me how to look at problems from different perspectives, how to troubleshoot issues, how to run things to ground. And I genuinely enjoy it when it finally works. And we had a recent experience of that. And I can't go into the details, but once we figured out what was wrong and it all flowed, there's a moment of euphoria. And that is just something that keeps me going on and on. To your point, I've been doing it for 20 years. It's a pleasure to work at Fenwick West. It's a pleasure to talk with you. And I look forward to our chat.
What's unique about delivering IT in this environment?
I would say the key concept to get across to people who are not familiar with the space is, one of my favorite words is context. Everything has context. Is it okay for this to occur? Is it not okay for this to occur? When can something occur? When can it not occur? Is it okay for these people, but not for these people? How do you administrate that? How do you monitor that? How do you report on that? How do you attest to that when you have clients or you have governments, co-counsel, opposing counsel that are asking information in real time? And being in the position to ensure that the folks who have to answer those questions can give a truthful, accurate, and defensible answer at any particular point in time all depends on context. So that's one word, another of which is, I'll call it the vernacular, and learning what attorneys mean when they say certain things so that you can participate with their needs in real time and deliver a solution that is, on the one hand, bespoke, on the other hand, repeatable, on the other hand, sustainable, all those type of things. That's what's unique about working in law firms, particularly in IT.
What's an example? Give us some attorney jargon that we lay people wouldn't know about otherwise.
Sure. A perfect example is we have a unique situation with a key client that is going to have bespoke needs for inclusionary walls. We are going to be working a multi-party offense, so to speak, and different law firms will be doing different things at the same time in parallel in support of whatever is the client's endeavor. There will be areas where everybody can see information. There'll be areas where only Fenwickians can see their data. There will be situations where Fenwickians selectively share who can see what, and the other entities need to have the same access. It has to work. It has to simple. It has to be up 100% of the time. We call that Wednesday.
Glad I asked you for only one example. So as the client of an attorney like a Fenwick, when I'm on the clock and being charged with from the client's perspective, I'd say is a high hourly rate for exceptional service. Mm-hmm. I never want to hear that the service can't be delivered because of some technology impediment. I'm curious to know, what did you go through during the pandemic when all of a sudden the demand for attorney services didn't necessarily go down, but you went to having, N number of home offices and, shift on a dime to same quality of service, same sophisticated services like that string of gibberish that you just provided. and as far as I can tell, looking in from the outside, it just worked. Like, what was that like?
Thank you for the question. We can now talk about it in here's what we learned and here's the lessons learned from that whole experience. To be perfectly candid, when the pandemic hit us, it was terrifying. We were technically ready in the context that we had the potential to meet the need. We had to deliver the need quickly. And I would like to say that we saw the pandemic coming 6 months in advance and were incredibly well prepared and folks were well practiced and we transitioned on a dime and everything was fine. And that just simply was not the case. We responded quickly. We got ahead of the curve by embracing the logistical challenge of, well, heck, we need notebooks for everybody. And at that point in time, we had a number of folks at the firm who were still operating off of desktops. Where can we get the notebooks? These are all good questions. All right. Who has the notebooks? How fast can we get them? Can we pay for expedited shipping? All those type of things. So we were able to meet that need. That was one example. Then another example is showing people who weren't used to desktops. And it wasn't a large number, but it was notable. Okay, here's how you use a notebook. Here's how you connect remotely. And then we went through the phase of what happens when people are now working remotely for an extended period of time and they no longer had the ability to walk down the hall and use the device, talk to the person, do the physical handoff. And we had to change our workflows, some of which lent themselves to a technological improvement or automation, others of which required a redesign of, I'll call it, the social internal services. And then people pivoted. We went from having the occasional video conference call before the pandemic to audio-visual capability is now the equal of email in terms of importance on any day of the week at almost any hour of the day. So those were all things that we had to embrace. There were some tools that we need to purchase. There was some training that we needed to provide. And I think this is really germane to the question that you asked. We then had to simplify it to the point where it was reliable for the average person to be able to embrace it and run with it without having to go through hours worth of training or having people immediately available. Because frankly, we were stretched thin across a number of different fronts and working together. And I think this is a hallmark of Fenwick and West. And I admit my bias. I work here and I'm proud of that. We figured it out and then we figured out how to do it better. And then every single day we try to do it just a little bit better, with the goal being we want this to be excellent.
The office that we're in right now is like Jarvis level sophistication in terms of how it's kitted out with technology. And yet you and I kind of became friends nerding out over what might be ahead. When you look around this office and you think about a digital experience of the future that you'd like to achieve, where's the innovation going to come from that we don't have right now?
Well, that's a really good question. I think there's a couple of things. I like to use the analogy of a fire extinguisher. So it's one thing to enter into a space and you don't have a fire extinguisher, but someday you might need a fire extinguisher. Okay, so now you have a fire extinguisher and it's over in the corner because that was a convenient place to put it. Strategically, later on, you might think, well, tell you what, let's put the fire extinguisher where the fires might be. Let's put the tool near the solution, or the solution near the tool is what I should have said. And then ultimately you get to the point where, well, what can we do to remove the fire extinguisher? Let's get rid of the combustible materials. And one of the things that I think we are in a position of transition, kind of a focus of this discussion, is AI is a fire that's coming. We don't want to extinguish it. We want to embrace it, but fire can burn. We need to learn how to manage it. We need to learn how to, when I say control it, maybe it'd be better to say how to direct our resources and direct our efforts to where it's going to go, and then find out how fast we can go there. What are its limitations? What are the things that it lends itself to? AI, as you mentioned in the introduction, can do a variety of things at this point. A couple of years from now, we'll know here's what it can do really, really well. Here's what are still, or here are some things that are still on the to-do list. And I imagine that we'll be in a similar place. I would like to see an environment, and I think Fenwick and West can deliver on it, where when a professional joins the firm, they are presented with here's today. And over the course of time, our various systems, including our human-based systems, are watching how people mature the needs that they have, putting solutions in front of them right when they need it, ultimately getting to the point where those humans are bettering everything that they've experienced for the next person we hire. That's where I'd like to see AI take us. And I'm optimistic about that. We'll be able to achieve that goal.
We're sitting here recording this in June of 2023. And let's call it, we're 7 months into this global experiment with generative AI. And the demand from the business, I assume at Fenwick, just like elsewhere, is insatiable. Everyone's curious, wants to experiment. And as an IT leader, using your fire extinguisher analogy, we don't know where the fire is going to crop up. We know it's probably going to be hot, and we know there's probably going to need to be an extinguisher. How do you play that role of fire chief and enable the business to rub sticks together to make fire, but prevent it from becoming a wildfire?
Sure, it's an excellent question. And the simple answer to the equation is we have a safe environment for people to experiment. A more simplistic view of it is we recognize that fire can do different things. So we've created an environment where there's nothing combustible. So we want people to go here, try it, learn, kick the tires. We want to see what type of questions people are asking, how folks actually use it. There's a lot of theory. We want to see what is the Fenwick reality. And then based upon that, we will build our strategic direction and ultimately, hopefully get to the point where we need a minimal amount of fire extinguishers because we know how to use fire really, really well and for good.
It's what the best leaders do. You're a window and not a door.
I agree.
Permit the use, but provide some guardrails for how to do it responsibly. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the role that large language models could play in the legal industry. Famously, GPT-4 was able to pass the MCAT and the LSAT with flying colors. And so it's reasonable that not all, but some in law firms globally are starting to think about their roles and what it means when their colleague might be a bot, and that colleague might be able to do a lot of the tasks that they can do that they thought were innate to the human experience. They got a degree, they worked hard, they're proud of what they can do, and now it turns out a large language model can do a lot of those things at a high level of quality. As a technology leader, how do you think about where there might be real opportunities to improve productivity by supplementing humans with AI? And then what are some of the things that you think are just never good candidates or task candidates for replacement using AI?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I think the easiest answer conceptually is what can we automate? What processes can we improve? What are the low-hanging fruit? And here's a simple example. When a person comes to Fenwick and West, or if we were to apply this largely to society, the first opportunity I have to fill out a form, what if that's the last time I never ever need to enter that information? I mean, I think that's something that everybody could get excited about. Lord knows I would. So that's one. Another of which is recognizing what is valuable to people. And that could be in terms of utilization. That could also be how useful was the tool in a particular context, and recognizing when that tool could be useful to others, either with or before the need presents itself. So this gets into predictive intelligence. Oh, you're working on a whatever deal. Along that journey, there's going to be a need for this. You appear to be this far down the journey. I'm going to start presenting options to you as a way to help you either complete this deal efficiently or make you aware of things that you have to consider as you go through, or as you see this through to fruition. That's another one. And then the latter question that you asked in terms of what do I think are not good candidates, my humble opinion, I think it's really, really hard to program ethics. And I've yet to see any example where you can program care. There's a difference when you're working with a person who cares about your problem. They may not be able to help you in the moment, but they're going to be able to help you. A system is really good at saying, can't help you. And that's not an acceptable answer, particularly to people in need, particularly to the clients that we serve and such. So in my humble opinion, I think there is always going to be a need for caring people that can follow ethics, that truly like to problem solve and drive issues to ground and delight in other people's success. I don't know that a system can do that. A system can help that. The system can't do that.
Let's take that down to the micro level. So in your career, you've hired and screened probably hundreds of candidates. Do you think that in, let's say, 3 to 5 years, midterm horizon, your philosophy on hiring will change because you might value some of those, call them interpersonal skills, more than you have historically? And not to put words in your mouth, but is it possible you might undervalue some of the traditional kind of tech-oriented, exam-based skills that are required today?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. And I think the simple answer is yes, but over the course of time, I'm going to figure out the how. Using today, literally today as an example, ultimately how a person like me is judged is, do things work? Is the job getting done? That's great. So when I'm hiring for folks, or when I'm hiring people, I'm looking for a variety of skill sets. And yes, I want them to be nice. Yes, I want them to be caring. Yes, I want them to be empathetic. But I also need to know that they can get the job done. If AI can help more people get the job done, the priority, or I should say the qualifications of what will be an excellent teammate could change. If the systems are good enough at helping people connect dots, that we now worry more about, well, how empathetic are they consistently? How excellent are they under pressure? Can they work in large groups? Can they travel across different departments and liaise and understand quickly and things of that nature, as compared to being a subject matter expert on a particular type of application or technology? Yeah, I could absolutely see the needle on that moving over the course of time. And I, for one, am excited about it. In the legal vertical, in a general sense, everything has to work all of the time. That's the goal. In the grand scheme of things, the people whom I support are less interested in things that require me to turn a screwdriver, the patch that I applied. They want the system to work. They care that I and my team were able to get the system to work, but they're more interested in me helping them solve their business problems. I would like for every technologist to have more time to focus on the business problems as compared to system maintenance. And I think AI can help us with that too.
So one of the things that's unique about your role is, as you alluded to, heavily regulated. I mean, you need ironclad audit trails. Everything could potentially be discoverable in a court of law. But in the meantime, part of your competitive advantage is being able to innovate and being able to deliver that exceptional quality of service to the end client. Do you ever think about those as being kind of two levers that don't always turn in concert? And how do you when you're making decisions, how do you think about managing both the risk from a regulatory perspective without wanting to be a constraint on innovation for the business?
Sure, it's another excellent question, and it's a difficult one to answer because there's no perfect answer. If we were so risk adverse and we drove our clients to go back to using pencils and paper, we would be out of business. So that's one. If we look at the fact that we have clients that want to collaborate with us and they want it to be as easy as possible, the challenge actually is what's a solution that enables that to occur, and we can maintain the security requirements, the confidentiality requirements, the availability requirements, all those type of things, and be able to attest to it later. Here's what happened, when, where, why, how, those type of things. A key component of that is clearly understanding what is the need, and then breaking it down into how we will accomplish it. And ultimately, what is the process that we will put into place so that whenever a person is delivering that service the next time, they are repeating a known standard with customizations as needed for the client and such, but we have it recorded. We can present to it. We can attest to it. And in a way, there's an old adage, when you tell the truth, you don't have to remember what you say. If you do the right things with the right systems, the audit logs will prove that we did it correctly. And then along the way, we'll just sometimes discover, oh, we need to make a tweak, or the government will make a change. There's a new law. We might have a client that specifically has a need. We got to have the flexibility as well to be able to meet that need or that change. And from this point in time forward, or for this client on that matter going forward, we do it this way, and that's recorded. That's a long and rambling answer, but if you get used to the idea of understanding what the deliverable is, and then re-engineering the equation to here's how we can deliver the deliverable safely, securely, and reliably, you can get it done. That's kind of fun.
It drives me crazy when my bank requires some kind of paper form, or I need to rely on snail mail for something. I can't remember what the service provider was. I think it might have been my credit card company or something, asked me to fax something.
Oh, wow.
And I tried my best to be polite, but I wasn't entirely polite in my reply. Are there examples like that where maybe, that credit card company or the bank or whatever is somehow regulated to enforce, some just arcane process for historic reasons, where in the legal field, you have to defend doing something that as a technologist, delivers a really poor experience, but you have to say, we do it just because.
The answer to all of that is yes. There are institutions that still require data in a particular format that the average person with a smartphone might find frustrating. But we don't have the ability to dictate what the new standard should be. We have to comply with the inevitable. So there are a couple of fax machines that are still present within Fenwick and West. Interestingly, we've migrated all of those services to the cloud. So if we look at it from an algebraic equation, we're doing all the right things, but the deliverable is something archaic, but it works. And we don't have the infrastructure to maintain or the systems to keep alive or the electricity being consumed there. So that's one small example. Another of which is occasionally we will have a process, and I think this is a challenge for every institution, particularly law firms. We will have a process, we'll have a service, for whatever reason, is popular. And it works well enough. It works well enough to the perspective that people don't want it to change, even though other things have marched forward. Eventually, we'll get to the point on those things where the end is here. We now have to adjust. It could be a security update. It could be an incompatibility. Once in a while, things change from a service delivery standpoint to third parties where this is no longer acceptable. Great, and then we can use that as a catalyst forward. It's really easy to focus on the brand new and what's interesting. It's really easy to get rid of the things that people don't use and don't like. Sometimes it's hard to get rid of the thing that just works. But it's inevitable.
We've had two great conversations in the past with a friend of mine, friend of the podcast, serial CIO named Mark Settle, who was most recently at Okta, but been CIO, I think he's 7-time CIO. And asked him the question I'm going to ask you. I asked him, are you a people leader first, or are you a technologist first? Now, I will caveat Mark's answer with the fact that he's a PhD in geology. And I was curious, after a long career in technology, how he'd answer. You have a similar long tenure in this space. What is Jim first?
Well, that's an interesting question. In some regards, it may have depended upon where I was in my career. There was a point in time where I was okay with technology. Now I'd like to think that I'm okay leading teams. I lead with people first. And my background is not geology. My background in some ways is team sports. And I learned the art, a little bit of science, but I also learned the art of working with different people with different perspectives who can come together with a common goal, such as we need to win on Saturday. Well, what does that take? Well, that takes a whole lot of conversation. That takes a whole lot of flexibility and learning to read the room, read the tea leaves, whatever is the metaphor that we want to use. When we work in an environment like this, Fenwick and West is absolutely fantastic, but it's also fair to say it can be stressful. There are deliverables that have to be met. Things have to work, and sometimes they don't. Well, how do you respond to that? In my experience, you don't go far fast yelling. In the moment, let's get it fixed. If there's something we need to learn after the fact, well, let's talk about that. Let's do it over a conversation. Let's eliminate as much fear as possible from people being able to do their job excellently so that when the tough occurs, they're not afraid. That's key. And I don't think you can do that just by moving a mouse. I think that, in my humble opinion, to be an effective leader in this space, you've got to be effective with people and vice versa. You got to listen to feedback a lot.
You're talking to an audience of a lot of aspiring CIOs. What's your advice to a younger version of Jim?
Oh, good question. I think there's two things. The first of which is whatever problem you have faced or you're facing, I would say in a general sense, has been experienced by somebody else at some point in the past. So as a small example, when I'm faced with challenges, I will try to find, and it's confusing to me, I will try to find a historical precedent and see what they did. Less so in terms of, oh, that's exactly what I need to do. But if I was presented in a situation, and for me, this was when the pandemic hit us, the answer is yes, the question's how. Whatever we do, we cannot quit. We cannot stop. So I look through history for a really good example of somebody who was facing overwhelming odds and helped find a way to make that be successful. For me, it was Winston Churchill. So I just started looking at things like, what did Winston Churchill do in moments of duress? And what he did is held a stiff upper lip. Every once in a while had a really good quote, rallied the troops, and they found a way to be successful. Had help from lots of different people. I really, really appreciate that. That was one of the things that I think we as a department within Fenwick and West embraced during the pandemic, is we are in this together. We're going to be successful. We have no idea how we're going to be successful. We are going to get there. We're going to get there as quickly as possible, and we're going to celebrate that success. Don't be afraid of doing your job. Let's figure out how to do everybody's job well. So that would be one thing that I would give to people is, think about it. What's new to you isn't necessarily new. That's one. And then the second of which is, as difficult as it is, have balance in your life. Have outlets that are positive and such. I use exercise as one for, the alleviation of stress and such. Different people can do different things. There's no one right answer for anybody, but if all you do is the job, it will eventually consume you. If you have outlets, you can go into, figuratively speaking, an exercise room and come out tired, but your mind has been focusing on a variety of different things and things might be suddenly clear. Maybe a more efficient way to say that is sometimes more time spent on trying to solve the problem will not solve the problem. Sometimes you have to get away from it. You have to let your mind do some background thinking. You can come back with a clear perspective. And early on in my career, the answer to every problem was, well, work harder. And it's a trite saying, but it's really, really true. As I've gotten older and more mature in my role, I have to continuously learn to work smarter. That's how we solve tomorrow's problem.
200 episodes. And let's see, we've discussed Shakespeare and Plato in the past, but never have we discussed the leadership philosophy of Winston Churchill. Thanks for introducing that. One last question before I can let you off the hot seat. We're back having a version of this conversation. Let's say it's June of 2033. What's one workplace behavior that is common then that today seems like science fiction?
Walking into any conference room with audio-visual equipment and saying, connect me to my friend. And it just happens. The mics are properly tuned, the right things get muted, the right cameras are on, it just works. And this is something that I like to use as an example. We try really, really hard here at Fenwick and West to make that as seamless as possible, and it takes a whole lot of humans. Using science fiction as an example, 200 years in the future, there was a show called Star Trek, and they had a communications officer on the bridge handling AV. They hadn't solved it by then. So it might not be 2033, but I'm optimistic.
I sure hope it doesn't take 200 years. I'm gonna take the under on that one. Jim, this has been so much fun. Thanks for hosting me. Really good hanging out. Where can the audience learn more about you and your work?
Oh, good question. We have an excellent website, fenwick.com. I'm on LinkedIn if anybody wants to connect. Happy to have a conversation. And one of the things I really, really enjoy is a person's different perspective on a problem. I'm perpetually trying to figure out different ways to solve the same type of problems. I like having as many views as possible. I think it makes me that much more valuable as an employee. Excellent.
Well, this one's been a lot of fun, Jim. And gosh, that's a wrap for this week on AI and the future of work. As always, I'm your host, Dan Turchin. And of course, we are back next week with another fascinating guest.